The hallway outside the genetics laboratory was almost silent. Only the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the soft rhythm of footsteps echoed through the polished floor of St. Matthew Medical Center. Gabriel Moretti stood alone near the window. At 6'3", dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he looked like a man who belonged anywhere except inside a hospital. Power radiated from him without effort. The intricate tattoo that disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt hinted at a past most people feared to imagine. Doctors recognized his face. Nurses lowered their voices when he walked by. Patients instinctively moved aside. None of it mattered today. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt something stronger than control. Hope. Inside the examination room, his wife was laughing. The sound reached him through the half-open door. It was soft, warm, real. Dr. Amelia Carter had spent the entire morning reassuring frightened children in the emergency department before becoming a patient herself. Now she rested one hand over the tiny life growing beneath her heart. She had smiled every minute since sunrise. Gabriel had never seen anything more beautiful. He wasn't a man who believed he deserved happiness. He had built walls around his emotions years ago. Power demanded distance. Leadership demanded sacrifice. Love demanded trust. And Amelia had somehow convinced him that trust was still possible. They had married in secret almost 2 years earlier. No grand ceremony, no photographers, no headlines, only 2 rings, a quiet chapel, a promise whispered instead of shouted. It had been the only decision Gabriel had ever made entirely for himself. No family expectations, no business negotiations, just love. Their marriage remained hidden because the world surrounding Gabriel was never truly safe. The fewer people who knew about Amelia, the better. At least that was what he believed. The pregnancy had changed everything. He had already imagined teaching his child how to ride a bicycle. He had secretly purchased a tiny leather-bound storybook after passing a bookstore. One rainy afternoon, he even found himself smiling during meetings, something his closest associates noticed immediately. Nobody dared ask why. Amelia knew. She always knew. She had become the only person capable of reading the emotions. Gabriel spent decades hiding from everyone else. A nurse stepped into the hallway carrying a sealed envelope. "Mr. Moretti," Gabriel turned. "Yes, the laboratory asked me to give this to you personally." He accepted the envelope. It felt strangely heavy, probably because every future he imagined seemed folded inside it. Routine prenatal testing. Nothing more, nothing less. He thanked the nurse with a polite nod. She walked away. For several long seconds, he simply stared at the envelope. Sunlight spilled across the floor through the tall hospital windows. Dust floated quietly through the golden light. Everything felt peaceful. Too peaceful. His phone vibrated. He ignored it. Another vibration, then another. He silenced the device without looking at the screen. Nothing outside this hallway mattered. Not today. Slowly he opened the envelope. Several pages slid into his hands. Medical terminology. Reference numbers. Laboratory codes. He skimmed the first page. Normal. Second page. Normal. Third page. His eyes stopped. The world did not. The fluorescent lights continued humming. People continued walking. Somewhere down the corridor, a child laughed, but inside Gabriel, everything became perfectly still. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. He read the sentence again and again. The numbers never changed. His breathing slowed instead of quickened. Years of discipline had taught him never to react before thinking. But this wasn't anger. Not yet. It was disbelief. His fingers tightened around the paper. Someone cleared a throat nearby. "Mr. Moretti." The laboratory director approached carefully. "There shouldn't be any questions. Everything is explained in the report." Gabriel looked up. Only one question escaped. "You're certain?" The director hesitated only a fraction of a second. "Our laboratory follows strict procedures." Gabriel lowered his eyes back to the report. Strict procedures, scientific certainty, evidence, facts, words impossible to argue with. Inside the examination room, Amelia laughed again. She had no idea. She was choosing baby names. She was dreaming about nursery colors. She was planning a future Gabriel suddenly couldn't recognize. He remembered the first night they met. She had refused special treatment when his bodyguards tried clearing an emergency room. Instead, she looked directly into his eyes and calmly said, "Everyone waits their turn here." He had almost smiled, almost. Later that night, she stitched a deep cut across his shoulder without asking about its origin. She simply treated the wound, no judgment, no fear, no curiosity, only kindness. It was the first time someone had looked beyond the reputation, beyond the wealth, beyond the power. She saw the exhausted man hiding underneath. That memory collided violently with the sentence still printed on the page. How percent? His wedding ring suddenly felt heavier than gold. A symbol, a promise, a future. His thumb brushed against its smooth edge. Inside the room, Amelia called softly. Gabriel? He didn't answer. Instead, he slipped the ring from his finger. The movement was slow, deliberate, almost gentle. He placed it inside his pocket. The empty circle of skin left behind looked strangely pale, like something had already begun disappearing. The examination room door opened. Amelia stepped into the hallway. She held a tiny ultrasound photo. Joy illuminated every part of her face. There you are. She noticed his expression immediately. Her smile faded. What happened? Gabriel looked at her. Really looked, the woman he loved. The woman who had shared quiet mornings, late-night conversations, impossible dreams. The woman he trusted more than anyone alive, or thought he did. She reached for his hand. He took one step backward. Confusion filled her eyes. Gabriel. His voice came out calm, almost emotionless. I have to leave, she blinked. What? I have business, she frowned. Can we at least look at the ultrasound together? Silence, her hand slowly lowered. I don't understand. Neither did he. Not anymore. He wanted to ask questions. He wanted to demand explanations. He wanted someone to tell him the laboratory had made a mistake. Instead, he folded the report, placed it back inside the envelope, and walked past her. She stood motionless in the middle of the hallway, still holding the ultrasound picture, still waiting for him to turn around. He never did. Behind him, her voice broke for the first time. Gabriel? He stopped, only for a heartbeat. Without facing her, he whispered 2 words, I'm sorry. Then he kept walking. Amelia watched until the elevator doors closed. She looked down at the ultrasound photograph in her trembling hands. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but she had no idea what. Hours later, after the hospital had grown quiet, a young laboratory technician entered the records room alone. He locked the door, opened a secure computer, and stared at one digital file. His hands trembled. On the screen, 2 DNA reports existed. One was marked official. The other was marked original. The numbers were almost identical, except one single digit. Long before a single number shattered their future, Gabriel Moretti had believed that his life would end exactly as it had begun. Alone, powerful, untouchable, he had inherited wealth before he inherited freedom. Every room he entered expected him to lead. Every decision carried consequences measured not only in money, but in loyalty. People respected him. Many feared him. Very few ever looked him in the eye. Even fewer spoke to him as if he were simply another human being. That changed on a cold November evening. Rain had turned the streets of Manhattan into ribbons of reflected light. A collision involving 3 vehicles sent several injured people to Mafia Medical Center. At nearly the same time, Gabriel arrived with a deep cut across his shoulder. One of his security men moved toward the reception desk. We need a private room. Before the receptionist could answer, another voice interrupted. No. It was calm, firm, not rude, just absolute. Doctor. Amelia Carter stepped from behind the nurse's station, still wearing blue surgical gloves stained with fresh traces of blood from another patient she had just treated. Her hair had slipped loose from its knot. Dark circles rested beneath tired eyes. She looked exhausted. She also looked completely unimpressed by the expensive suits surrounding Gabriel. We have children waiting, she said evenly. We have elderly patients waiting. Everyone waits their turn tonight. One of Gabriel's men took another step. Do you know who you're talking to? Amelia didn't even glance at him. I'm talking to someone who's bleeding. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt the corner of his mouth almost lift into a smile. He raised one hand, stopping his security team. It's fine. His men exchanged surprised looks. No one argued. 20 minutes later, Gabriel sat quietly inside an examination room while Amelia cleaned the wound across his shoulder. The cut was deeper than it first appeared. You'll need stitches. I've had worse. I'm sure you have, she threaded the needle. But scars don't become less important just because you've collected a few. Her words lingered longer than either of them expected. She worked with remarkable precision, never asking where the injury came from, never asking why a man surrounded by bodyguards carried so many old scars. She simply focused on the person sitting in front of her. When she finished, she placed fresh bandages over the wound. Try not to pretend you're indestructible. I don't. She looked directly into his eyes. Yes, you do, he laughed. It wasn't loud. It barely lasted a second, but every nurse outside the room noticed, because no one had ever heard Gabriel Moretti laugh inside a hospital. Over the following months, chance seemed determined to bring them together again. Sometimes he arrived with donations for the children's ward. Sometimes she worked late enough to miss the last train, and he quietly arranged a car without waiting for thanks. Neither admitted they were beginning to look forward to these encounters. Winter became spring. Coffee turned into dinners. Conversation stretched far beyond midnight. For the first time in decades, Gabriel spoke about his mother. She had believed strength meant protecting others, without asking for anything in return. She had died before seeing the man her son eventually became. "I still hear her voice sometimes," Gabriel admitted one evening as they walked through Central Park. "What does she say?" He looked toward the trees instead of answering immediately. "Don't mistake silence for courage." Amelia smiled gently. "She sounds wise." She was. "And are you listening to her?" He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Not often enough." Amelia reached for his hand. He hesitated, only for a heartbeat. Then their fingers intertwined. It felt surprisingly natural, as though two lonely lives had finally stopped moving in opposite directions. Months later, Gabriel brought her somewhere no one else had seen. A small stone chapel overlooking the Hudson River. The building was nearly forgotten. Its wooden pews creaked with age. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting quiet colors across the floor. There were no guests, no photographers, only an elderly priest and two simple rings. Gabriel looked unusually nervous. "I've negotiated billion-dollar agreements," he admitted. "I've never been this afraid." Amelia smiled. "Why?" "Because this is the only promise I can't afford to break." She reached into her pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. "What is it?" "A list." He raised an eyebrow. "A list of reasons not to marry me." She laughed softly. "No, a list of reasons we should." She unfolded it. "You always remember how I take my coffee. You apologize when you're wrong. You never interrupt children. You donate anonymously. You listen more than you speak." She looked up. "And when you think no one's watching, you look unbearably lonely." For several seconds, Gabriel couldn't answer. No one had ever understood him so completely. He slipped the ring onto her finger. "So you'll marry me?" "I thought we were already doing that. I just wanted to hear you say yes." She laughed through happy tears. "Yes." It was the quietest wedding imaginable, and the happiest day of both their lives. They agreed to keep their marriage private. Not because they were ashamed, because Gabriel knew the world around him often turned innocent people into targets. The fewer who knew Amelia was his wife, the safer she would be. At least that was what he believed. Their apartment overlooked the East River. It wasn't his largest home. It was the only one that ever felt lived in. Books slowly replaced expensive decorations. Fresh flowers appeared every Friday, because Amelia insisted every home deserved something alive. She filled the kitchen with music while cooking. He learned that burnt pancakes were still edible if shared with someone laughing. Some nights she fell asleep on the couch after a 30-hour hospital shift. Gabriel would quietly cover her with a blanket before finishing whatever paperwork remained. Other nights he couldn't sleep, she always knew. Without asking questions, she'd simply make tea and sit beside him. Silence no longer felt empty, it felt shared. Nearly 2 years passed this way. Then one snowy morning, Amelia walked into the apartment, carrying a tiny white box. She placed it on the dining table. "Open it." Inside rested a pair of impossibly small knitted baby socks. Gabriel stared. He looked back at her. She nodded. "We're having a baby." For several long seconds he couldn't speak. His eyes became brighter than she'd ever seen. He crossed the room and wrapped both arms around her with extraordinary care. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "You don't have to." "What if I'm not?" She placed one finger against his lips. "You already are." He rested his forehead against hers. For the first time since childhood, Gabriel Moretti cried, not because of pain, because happiness had finally found him. Over the next weeks, they imagined everything. A nursery with pale blue walls, bedtime stories, weekend breakfasts, a little girl with Amelia's smile, or perhaps a boy with Gabriel's quiet eyes. Neither realized someone else had begun paying close attention. Across town, inside the Moretti family office, Victor Moretti closed a financial report and frowned. One line caught his attention. A confidential trust fund. Its beneficiary had not yet been named, but one note changed everything. Reserved for Gabriel Moretti's lawful heir. Victor slowly leaned back in his chair, his expression hardened. For years he had quietly assumed there would never be a child, never an heir, never anyone standing between him and the future he believed should belong to him. He picked up his phone. "I need everything you can find on Dr. Amelia Carter." There was a brief pause, then the voice on the other end replied, "It'll be done." Victor ended the call without another word. He walked toward the window overlooking the city. Far below, life continued as usual. Ambulances rushed through traffic. People hurried home. Snow drifted gently across the streets. Somewhere inside St. Matthew Medical Center, a laboratory had already received 2 routine blood samples. No one inside the hospital suspected those samples were about to become the center of a conspiracy that would destroy an entire family. And in a quiet records office, someone had just requested access to files they should never have been allowed to see. For most people, betrayal arrived with a loud voice, a slammed door, a confession, a broken promise. For Gabriel Moretti, it arrived in complete silence. Weeks before the envelope reached his hands, life had never felt more certain. Amelia was entering her 2nd trimester. Morning sickness had slowly faded. The tiny heartbeat they had heard during the first ultrasound still echoed inside Gabriel's memory. He had never admitted it aloud, but he carried that sound with him everywhere. Sometimes during long meetings, he caught himself wondering whether the baby would inherit Amelia's kindness or his stubbornness. His closest advisor noticed the change. "You've been smiling more." Gabriel looked up from a stack of documents. "Have I?" "You don't even realize you're doing it." Gabriel said nothing. But when the meeting ended, he stopped by a toy store on the drive home. He bought a small wooden music box shaped like a moon. He imagined placing it beside a crib one day. He imagined tiny hands reaching toward it. He imagined a future he had never dared to dream about before Amelia. That evening, she found the gift hidden inside his desk. "You know babies can't use music boxes yet." "I know, so why buy it now?" He shrugged. "I didn't want to risk forgetting." Amelia smiled and wrapped her arms around him. "You've been planning this longer than I have." "Probably." She rested her head against his chest. "You're going to be an amazing father." Gabriel closed his eyes. "I hope our child believes that." She leaned back just enough to study his face. "Gabriel, you've spent your whole life believing love has to be earned." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But babies don't love like that. They simply do." Those words settled somewhere deep inside him. For the first time in decades, the future didn't feel like another responsibility. It felt like a gift. Miles away, Victor Moretti watched a very different future unfold. He sat alone in his office after everyone else had gone home. The confidential inheritance documents lay open before him. He read the same sentence for the 5th time. "The lawful biological heir shall receive controlling interest in the Moretti family trust." Victor slowly closed the folder. For years he had accepted waiting. If Gabriel never had children, influence would naturally drift toward the next closest relative. Toward him, now everything was changing. One child, one signature. One future erased, he picked up another file. Dr. Amelia Carter, emergency physician, excellent reputation, no financial scandals, no hidden relationships, nothing useful. His irritation grew. People with clean lives were surprisingly difficult to destroy. Then his phone vibrated. "I found something," his investigator said. Victor listened quietly. "A prenatal DNA screening has been scheduled." His expression changed. "When?" "Next week." Victor stared through the window. Sometimes fate didn't require force. Sometimes it only required opportunity. Find out which laboratory processes the sample. The call ended. For several minutes, the office remained silent. Victor reached for a business card tucked inside his wallet. A name, a laboratory technician. Someone who owed him more favors than either of them wished to remember. 3 days later, St. Matthew Medical Center operated like every other weekday. Stretchers rolled through crowded hallways. Monitors beeped steadily. Doctors hurried between patients. Deep inside the genetics laboratory, Daniel Brooks adjusted another tray of blood samples. He had worked there for nearly 12 years. His record was spotless, quiet, reliable, invisible. Exactly the kind of employee no one questioned. He was preparing to leave when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, he almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. "I believe you still owe me." Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "I paid everything." "You paid the money." A brief pause. "You haven't paid the favor." Daniel closed the laboratory door. "What do you want?" "One report. I don't alter medical records." "You won't." The voice remained calm. "You'll simply correct one number." Daniel's heart pounded. "No." "You remember your son's surgery." Daniel stopped breathing. "You remember who covered the hospital bills." Silence. "You remember who kept your gambling debt away from your employer." Daniel gripped the edge of the counter. His knees suddenly felt weak. "What exactly do you want?" "One digit." The call disconnected. Daniel remained frozen. For a long time he thought about his wife, his little boy, the mortgage. The debt he had spent years trying to escape, he whispered to the empty room. This isn't possible. But deep inside, he already knew it was. The prenatal samples arrived the following afternoon. Routine processing, routine identification, routine analysis. Machines did what machines always did. They measured, compared, calculated. Unlike people, they had no reason to lie. Late that evening, the system produced its final report. Daniel opened the digital file. His chest tightened. Probability of paternity, 99%. Healthy pregnancy, normal findings. Everything exactly as expected. He stared at the screen. His cursor hovered above the file. His phone buzzed once. Only one message appeared. Now. Daniel closed his eyes. His hands trembled. He moved the cursor. Opened the editing panel reserved for laboratory supervisors. He still had temporary authorization from covering another employee's shift. One number blinked, 99.99%. He pressed backspace. The first 9 disappeared, then another. He entered new digits with fingers that no longer felt like his own. 0.00%. The computer accepted the revision. Changes detected. Save. Daniel's breathing became uneven. His finger hovered over the mouse. He could still cancel. He could still restore the truth. Instead, he clicked. Save. The screen refreshed. The false report became official. For a moment, nothing happened. The world outside continued turning. Rain tapped softly against the laboratory windows. A cleaning cart rolled past the hallway. Someone laughed in the break room. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary lives. Completely unaware that a single click had just rewritten the future of 3 innocent people. Daniel pushed his chair back so quickly it nearly tipped over. He rushed to the restroom, locked the door, looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. What have I done? His reflection offered no answer. The following morning, Amelia finished a difficult overnight shift. She looked exhausted. Gabriel met her outside the emergency entrance carrying 2 cups of coffee. You need sleep. I need breakfast first. You always negotiate. She smiled. I married a negotiator. They walked slowly through the hospital garden. Cherry blossoms drifted across the path. Amelia stopped beneath one of the trees. She placed Gabriel's hand gently over her stomach. I think the baby kicked. He waited. Nothing then. The faintest movement, tiny, almost impossible to notice. His eyes widened. Did you feel that? She laughed. I asked you first. He nodded slowly. I did. Neither of them noticed the security camera mounted above the garden entrance. Neither noticed another pair of eyes watching the live feed from a nearby office. Victor observed the scene without expression. A happy family, a husband, a wife, an unborn child. He should have felt guilty. Instead, he felt threatened. He quietly turned off the monitor. 2 days later, Daniel returned to the laboratory before sunrise. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amelia smiling in the hallway. He opened the database. The original automated result was still there. Hidden, untouched. The system never truly erased machine-generated data. It only archived previous versions. Daniel copied the original report onto an encrypted backup drive. He hesitated, then slipped the small flash drive into the inside pocket of his lab coat. I'll fix this, he whispered, somehow. But before he could decide how, the laboratory door opened behind him. Someone had entered without knocking. Daniel slowly turned around. His face drained of color. Daniel Brooks could barely breathe. The laboratory door remained open behind him. For one endless second, he imagined Victor Moretti had come to silence him forever. Instead, it was the laboratory director. You're here early. Daniel forced himself to smile. I couldn't sleep. The director glanced at the computer screen. Everything all right? Daniel quickly minimized the archived files. Just organizing yesterday's reports. The older man nodded without suspicion. Good, Mr. Moretti is expected this morning. Make sure his paperwork is ready. Daniel's stomach tightened. Of course. As the director walked away, Daniel slipped the encrypted flash drive deeper into his pocket. It felt heavier than metal. It felt like a confession. Outside, the city was waking beneath a pale spring sky. Gabriel parked across from St. Matthew Medical Center. He checked his watch. Amelia had texted him 30 minutes earlier. Don't be late. Baby wants to see Daddy today. He read the message twice, then smiled. He never answered with long messages. Instead, he replied with a single heart. It was enough. She understood him. She always had. He walked through the hospital entrance carrying a paper bag from her favorite bakery. Blueberry muffins, fresh coffee, the ordinary rituals that had quietly become the happiest parts of his life. He never reached her office. The nurse intercepted him in the hallway. Mr. Moretti. Yes. The laboratory asked me to give you this personally. A sealed envelope. Routine. Harmless, or so it appeared. Minutes later, the future collapsed inside a quiet corridor. After Gabriel disappeared into the elevator, Amelia remained exactly where he had left her. The ultrasound picture trembled in her hand. She replayed every second his face, his voice, the distance in his eyes. She had spent years reading fear, grief, and exhaustion on the faces of strangers. But what she had just seen, she couldn't recognize. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was something colder, something final, she whispered to herself. What happened? No answer came. That evening, the apartment overlooking the East River felt unfamiliar. The flowers on the kitchen table were beginning to fade. Dinner remained untouched. The blueberry muffins still rested inside their paper bag. Amelia heard the front door open. Relief washed over her. She hurried toward the hallway. Gabriel, he stood perfectly still. His suit jacket remained buttoned, his expression unreadable. He looked exhausted. Older, somehow, she stepped closer. I've been calling you, I know. You didn't answer. No. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked the only question that mattered. What happened at the hospital? Gabriel removed the folded laboratory report from his coat. He placed it gently on the dining table. Explain this. Amelia looked down. She read the first page, then the second. When she reached the final line, her face lost all color. No, she read it again. The words refused to change. Probability of paternity, 0%. Her lips parted. This can't be right. Gabriel watched every movement, every breath, every blink. He wanted to see outrage, confusion. Anything that would prove the report was impossible. Instead, he saw shock, real shock. But years of teaching himself to trust evidence over instinct had already begun building walls around his heart. Amelia looked up. There has to be a mistake, a laboratory mistake. Yes, they confirmed it. She took another step toward him. Then we asked them again. They're certain. No laboratory is perfect. They said their procedures are. She shook her head desperately. I have worked in that hospital for years. I know how often results have to be repeated. Gabriel remained silent. She searched his face. You believe this? His answer came quietly. I don't know what else to believe. Those words hurt more than any accusation, because they carried uncertainty instead of rage. If he had shouted, if he had blamed her, perhaps she could have fought back, but doubt left no clear enemy, only distance. Tears filled her eyes. I have never been with another man. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they seemed emptier. I wish I could believe that. The room became unbearably still. Amelia felt something inside her break, not because he doubted the child, because he doubted her, the one promise they had built their marriage upon, trust. She reached for his hand. He didn't move away, but he didn't hold hers either. I love you. His jaw tightened. I know. No, she shook her head. You don't. If you did, you would know I would never do this. His voice became almost a whisper. The report says otherwise. Amelia looked at the piece of paper lying between them. Ink, numbers, medical language. Somehow, a few printed lines had become louder than 2 years of love. She realized then that no explanation would matter tonight. He wasn't choosing another woman. He wasn't choosing anger. He was choosing certainty. And certainty had taken the shape of paper. She slowly removed her own wedding ring. She didn't throw it. She placed it beside his laboratory report, very gently. I won't beg you to believe me. Gabriel's breathing caught. She continued softly. Because if love needs begging, it has already been lost. She walked past him toward the bedroom. Neither spoke again that night. 3 days later, Amelia packed one suitcase, not because she owned little, because she couldn't bear taking memories. She folded baby clothes they had bought together. Left them inside the nursery. She left the tiny wooden music box on the shelf. She left framed photographs untouched. Only one thing came with her, the ultrasound picture. Before leaving, she wrote one short letter. Gabriel, I hope one day the truth finds you. Until then, I'll protect our child with everything I have. Please don't look for us until you're ready to believe my voice as much as you believe that report. Amelia. She placed the letter beside the music box, closed the nursery door, and walked away. She never looked back. Weeks became months. Months became years. Sophia entered the world on a quiet autumn morning. She had Gabriel's dark eyes. Amelia noticed them immediately. The nurses did too. She looks just like her father. Amelia smiled through tears. I know. She never corrected them. She never spoke badly about Gabriel. Whenever Sophia grew old enough to ask, "Where's my daddy?" Amelia always answered the same way. He's a good man. He just doesn't know how much you love him yet. Across the city, Gabriel buried himself in work. His associates believed he had become stronger, more disciplined, more feared. The truth was far different. Every Friday evening, without telling anyone, he drove past the apartment Amelia once loved. He never stopped. He never went inside. He simply slowed the car, looked toward the balcony filled with empty flower pots, then drove away. The nursery remained untouched. The tiny wooden music box collected dust. Some nights, unable to sleep, Gabriel opened the door and stood silently in the darkness. He never switched on the light. He couldn't, because once he did, he would have to admit he had built an entire room for a child he believed was never his. One rainy evening, he finally opened Amelia's letter. He had avoided it for nearly 7 years. His eyes stopped on one sentence: "I hope one day the truth finds you." He read those words again and again. For reasons he couldn't explain, they no longer sounded like denial. They sounded like certainty, like a woman who had never doubted herself for even a moment. Gabriel folded the letter carefully. For the first time in years, something unfamiliar entered his heart. Not hope, not forgiveness, a question. What if she had been telling the truth all along? At that exact moment, across town, Daniel Brooks unlocked a small safety deposit box hidden inside his late father's garage. His hands trembled as he removed the encrypted flash drive he had kept secret for 7 years. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered into the empty room, "I can't hide this anymore." Behind him, unseen in the shadows, another pair of footsteps came to a stop. 7 years could change almost everything. Buildings rose where empty lots once stood. Restaurants disappeared. Children learned to read. Gray quietly found its way into dark hair. But grief had a strange way of refusing time. It simply learned how to sit quietly. Gabriel Moretti had become even more respected than before. People described him as disciplined, strategic, unshakable. No one realized those qualities had become a way of surviving rather than living. His mornings began before sunrise. His evenings ended long after midnight. He accepted every meeting, every responsibility, every distraction. Anything that kept him from returning too early to a house that still echoed with memories. The nursery remained exactly as Amelia had left it. The tiny moon-shaped music box still rested on the shelf. A thin layer of dust covered its smooth wooden surface. Twice each month, the housekeeper offered to clean the room. Gabriel always answered the same way: "Leave it." She never asked why. Across the city, Amelia had built a different life. Not an easier one, just an honest one. She rented a modest apartment above a neighborhood bookstore. Every morning before school, Sophia sat beside the kitchen window, eating toast while drawing pictures with colored pencils. She loved drawing families. Sometimes they had dogs, sometimes gardens, sometimes balloons floating above smiling faces. There was always one drawing that looked almost the same. A mother, a little girl, and a tall man standing slightly apart. The man's face was never finished. One Saturday morning, Sophia looked up from her sketchbook. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "When Daddy smiles," Amelia paused, "does he smile with his whole face?" The question caught her by surprise. She leaned against the kitchen counter. "He does," Sophia continued, coloring. "What color are his eyes?" Amelia smiled softly. "The same as yours." Sophia's small fingers stopped moving. "So if I ever see someone with eyes like mine, could it be him?" A painful silence settled over the room. Amelia walked over and brushed a strand of hair away from her daughter's forehead. "It could," Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "I hope he isn't lonely." Amelia looked toward the window before answering. "So do I." That autumn, Gabriel's annual charity gala filled the ballroom of one of Manhattan's oldest hotels. Business leaders, hospital administrators, teachers, doctors, community volunteers. Every year, Gabriel insisted the event remain focused on children's health care. He never explained why. This year's fundraiser would finance a new pediatric cardiac wing at St. Matthew Medical Center, the same hospital where everything had fallen apart. His advisors had suggested choosing another venue. Years ago, he refused. Some wounds deserved to remain visible. Late in the evening, guests gathered around the stage as Gabriel finished a brief speech. Children deserve opportunities they didn't choose for themselves. He stepped away from the microphone before applause had fully begun. Public speaking had never interested him. Quiet action always mattered more. As he crossed the ballroom, a small voice stopped him. "Excuse me, mister." He turned. A little girl stood holding several folded drawings against her chest. She couldn't have been older than 7. Dark hair, bright eyes, steady posture. She looked surprisingly fearless. "My teacher says important people like thank you pictures." Gabriel crouched until they were eye level. And are you giving me one? She nodded. I made extra, just in case. He accepted the drawing carefully. Crayon lines filled the page. 3 people holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. Above them, a child's handwriting read, "Every family deserves another chance." Gabriel stared at the picture longer than he intended. It's beautiful, Sophia smiled proudly. My mom says drawings can tell people things they forget. Something tightened inside his chest. What does your mother do? She's a doctor. He looked up almost instinctively. Really? Sophia nodded. She fixes people. Before Gabriel could ask another question, a volunteer hurried toward them. There you are, Sophia. The woman laughed apologetically. I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti. She wandered away from the children's art table. It's all right, Sophia waved. Bye, mister. She disappeared into the crowd. Gabriel remained kneeling for another second. He couldn't explain why his heart was beating faster. There had been something strangely familiar about that little girl. Not her face, not her voice. Something deeper, something impossible to name. Later that night, Gabriel slipped the drawing into his briefcase, instead of throwing it away with the event brochures. When he arrived home, he carried it upstairs. Without thinking, he opened the nursery door. Moonlight filtered through the curtains. He placed the picture beside the untouched music box. For a long time, he simply stood there. The room suddenly felt less empty. 3 weeks later, life shifted without warning. Gabriel collapsed during a board meeting. At first, everyone assumed exhaustion. Then came the dizziness, the shortness of breath, the pain spreading across his chest. His security team rushed him to St. Matthew Medical Center. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was returning to the place he had spent 7 years avoiding. Medical tests continued throughout the afternoon. Blood work, imaging, cardiac monitoring. Finally, an older specialist entered the room carrying a folder. You've ignored these symptoms for quite some time. Gabriel remained calm. I've been busy. You've also been lucky. The doctor sat down. You have a rare hereditary cardiovascular condition. Gabriel frowned. Can it be treated? Yes. But because it's inherited, we strongly recommend identifying close biological relatives. Gabriel looked toward the window. I don't have children. The physician hesitated. Are you absolutely certain? The question landed harder than expected. Gabriel answered quietly. That's what I was told. The doctor closed the folder. Sometimes medicine teaches us not to mistake old information for permanent truth. Gabriel said nothing, but Amelia's letter suddenly echoed inside his mind. I hope one day the truth finds you. Across town, Daniel Brooks had finally made his decision. For 7 years he had hidden the encrypted flash drive. For 7 years guilt had followed him into every birthday, every family dinner, every quiet moment. His son was now 14. Healthy, happy, everything Daniel had once believed he was protecting, and still, he couldn't sleep. He arranged the flash drive, printed copies of archived laboratory logs, and handwritten notes inside a plain envelope. On the front he wrote only 3 words. For Gabriel Moretti. He slipped the envelope into his coat. Tonight he would finally tell the truth. As he locked his front door, headlights swept across the empty street. A black sedan waited at the curb. Its engine idled quietly. The rear passenger window lowered halfway. Victor Moretti sat inside. I was hoping we'd have one last conversation. Daniel's face turned pale. I have nothing left to say. Victor smiled. I don't think that's true. The next morning, St. Matthew Medical Center organized a free community health fair sponsored by Gabriel's Foundation. Families filled the lobby. Children received balloons. Volunteers handed out snacks and coloring books. Sophia walked beside Amelia, proudly wearing a paper name tag that read, Junior Volunteer. Can I help at the welcome desk? Amelia laughed. You've been waiting all week to ask that. Sophia grinned. I like helping people. As they entered the main lobby, another elevator opened across the hall. Gabriel stepped out slowly, still recovering from his medical tests. His eyes wandered across the busy entrance, then stopped. Standing only a few yards away was the little girl from the gala. She looked up at exactly the same moment. Their eyes met. Neither of them knew why the world suddenly seemed to grow quiet. Sophia smiled first. Gabriel felt his heartbeat stumble. Not from illness, from recognition. He still didn't know her name. He had no reason to believe she was connected to him. Yet something deep inside him whispered a truth his mind refused to accept. And somewhere else in the hospital, a locked office computer displayed an alert that no one had noticed. Archived laboratory file recovered. Original version available for review. Some truths did not arrive like lightning. They arrived like dawn, quietly, almost unnoticed, one small detail at a time. Gabriel stood frozen in the hospital lobby. The little girl smiled as though she had known him forever. Hi. Her voice was bright enough to soften the noise surrounding them. He managed a small smile in return. Hello? She pointed toward the folded drawing tucked beneath his arm. You kept it? Gabriel looked down. It was the same picture she had given him at the charity gala. Without realizing it, he had brought it to the hospital after leaving his room. I did. Sophia's smile grew wider. My mom says people only keep things that matter, for reasons Gabriel couldn't explain. Those words settled deep inside him. They're usually right. Before either of them could say another word, Amelia stepped out of a nearby examination room carrying a patient's chart. She wasn't looking toward the lobby, not at first. Then she heard Sophia laugh. She turned. The chart slipped slightly in her hands. 7 years disappeared in a heartbeat. Gabriel, standing only a few feet from their daughter, neither of them spoke. The hallway seemed to empty around them. Sophia looked happily between the two adults. You know each other. Amelia forced herself to breathe. Yes, a long time ago. Gabriel searched Amelia's face. Time had changed small things. A few silver threads caught the light near her temples. There were new lines around her eyes, not from age. From carrying too much alone, yet she still looked at people with the same quiet kindness that had first drawn him toward her. Sophia tugged gently on Amelia's sleeve. Mom, this is the nice man from the party. Amelia swallowed. I know. For one impossible moment, Gabriel almost asked the question that had lived inside him since reading her letter. Instead, a nurse hurried toward Amelia. Dr. Carter, Trauma Room 3 needs you. She nodded immediately. Duty first. Always. She looked back at Gabriel. I have to go, he answered with a quiet nod. So do I. Neither mentioned the past, neither mentioned the child, neither mentioned the DNA report. But when Amelia walked away, Gabriel realized something that unsettled him. She had never looked guilty, not once, only sad. Later that afternoon, Gabriel's cardiologist reviewed additional test results. The condition appears hereditary. He tapped a page thoughtfully. We'd still like to identify blood relatives if possible. Gabriel stared at the file. I've spent 7 years believing I have none. The physician looked at him carefully. Belief and biology aren't always the same. Again, another doctor, another reminder. Another crack in the certainty he had lived with for years. Elsewhere in the hospital, Daniel Brooks sat alone in his car. The envelope addressed to Gabriel rested on the passenger seat. He had failed to deliver it. Victor's unexpected appearance the previous night had shaken him badly. The conversation replayed endlessly in his mind. Victor had smiled almost politely. You've protected your family for 7 years, Daniel had answered quietly. I protected myself. Victor's smile disappeared. Then don't make the mistake of changing your mind. Daniel had driven away without responding, but the threat lingered. Now he looked at the envelope again. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I can't keep running. Instead of leaving, he walked back into the hospital, not toward Gabriel, toward the laboratory archives. If he was going to tell the truth, he wanted proof no one could deny. The genetics department had changed dramatically over 7 years. New computers, new software, new staff. Only one familiar face remained. Margaret Ellis, the senior laboratory supervisor. She looked up from her desk. Daniel, I need your help, she frowned. You resigned 5 years ago. I know. I also know you never came back. Daniel nodded. I need to review an archived prenatal case. Margaret adjusted her glasses. Those files require authorization. I understand. It's important. She studied him for several long seconds, then quietly asked, important enough to lose sleep over? Daniel lowered his eyes. I haven't slept well in 7 years. Something in his voice changed her expression. Without another question, she led him into the archive room. Rows of secure servers hummed softly behind reinforced glass. Margaret entered her credentials. What case number? Daniel recited it from memory. He never could forget it. The system searched. Loading, loading. Then an unexpected notification appeared. Archived revision history available. Margaret frowned. That's strange. What is? Revision histories from that period were supposed to be permanently migrated years ago. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Can you open it? She clicked. Several versions appeared. Original, reviewed, official. Margaret leaned closer. Why are there multiple finalized reports? Daniel closed his eyes because he already knew. The machine hadn't forgotten. The truth had been waiting all this time. Margaret opened the earliest file. Her eyebrows rose. This doesn't match the official record, Daniel whispered. I know. She looked at him. What happened? He finally answered the question he had avoided for 7 years. I changed it. Silence filled the room. Margaret stared at him in disbelief. You altered a DNA report. His eyes filled with tears. I changed one number. Why? I thought I was saving my family. Instead, I destroyed someone else's. Margaret slowly sat down. You understand what this means? Daniel nodded. It means I've been living inside a lie. At nearly the same moment, another discovery unfolded across town. Gabriel's longtime family attorney, Samuel Whitmore, was preparing documents for the annual review of the Moretti Family Trust. While organizing older files, he noticed a sealed envelope tucked behind a property deed. The handwriting on the front immediately caught his attention. To my son, Gabriel. It was signed by his late mother. Samuel frowned. He was certain he had never seen the letter before. The seal had never been broken. He hesitated, then called Gabriel. You need to come by my office. Can it wait? No, it's from your mother. Gabriel closed his eyes. My mother. I believe she wanted you to read it when you finally had something worth protecting. Those words lingered after the call ended. Something worth protecting, he thought of Amelia. Then unexpectedly, he thought of Sophia. That evening, Gabriel arrived at the attorney's office just as rain began falling outside. Samuel placed the unopened envelope on the desk. I found it hidden inside your trust documents. Gabriel traced the familiar handwriting with his fingertips. His mother's elegant script hadn't changed. Only the years between them had. He carefully opened the letter. Inside was a single page. He began reading. If you're holding this letter, then life has finally given you someone you love more than your own pride. Gabriel stopped breathing. His mother knew him too well, he continued. Never allow fear to convince you that evidence is the same as truth. Papers can be altered, stories can be manipulated. But the character of the person you love is built over years, not moments. His hands trembled. When the day comes that your heart and a document disagree, don't choose the easier answer. Choose the harder question. Tears blurred the ink. Gabriel slowly lowered the page. He remembered Amelia's face the night she left. Not defensive, not angry, only heartbroken. Suddenly, he wasn't remembering a woman caught in a lie. He was remembering a woman who couldn't understand why the man she loved had stopped believing her. For the first time in 7 years. Gabriel allowed himself to ask the question he had feared most. What if I abandoned the only person who ever told me the truth? Miles away inside the genetics archive, Margaret printed every version of the original laboratory report. She placed the pages into a secure evidence folder. Then she looked directly at Daniel. You don't need to carry this alone anymore. Daniel nodded weakly. I know. He reached for the folder. Before his fingers touched it, every light inside the archive room suddenly went dark. The servers fell silent. Emergency backup alarms began echoing through the building, and somewhere in the darkness, a door quietly opened. Darkness swallowed the archive room. For a brief second, the only sound was the sharp chorus of emergency alarms echoing through the genetics department. Margaret Ellis instinctively reached for the evidence folder. Daniel Brooks did the same. Then the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in a dim red glow. The servers were still. The monitors had gone black. Neither of them spoke. Every instinct Daniel possessed told him someone had chosen this exact moment for a reason. Margaret broke the silence first. The backup generators should have started already. Daniel looked toward the door. They should have. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow measured. Both of them turned. A hospital security officer appeared in the doorway. You two all right? Margaret released a quiet breath. We're fine. The outage affected the entire East Wing. Daniel's shoulders relaxed only slightly. The danger he had imagined hadn't arrived. Not yet. But something inside him whispered that time was running out. Less than an hour later, electricity returned throughout the hospital. The computer systems restarted one by one. Margaret immediately logged back into the archive server. To her surprise, the revision history was still there. Nothing had disappeared. She turned toward Daniel. Whatever happened, the file survived. Daniel nodded slowly. So did the truth. Margaret printed certified copies of every archived version, including the machine-generated report stamped with its original creation date. Across the top of the first page, in unmistakable black letters, appeared the result that had never been meant to vanish. Probability of paternity, 99%. No edits, no revisions, no doubts, only the truth. Margaret placed every document into a sealed evidence envelope. This stays with me until the hospital board reviews it. Daniel lowered his head. No, she looked at him. It belongs to Gabriel. At the same time, Gabriel remained alone inside his office. His mother's letter lay unfolded before him. He had read it 6 times. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. He remembered the first evening Amelia had stayed awake beside him, while he struggled through another sleepless night. He remembered her laughing over burnt pancakes. He remembered the quiet chapel, the promise they had whispered. He remembered the look in her eyes the night she said, "I won't beg you to believe me." Back then he had thought she sounded defeated. Now, he realized she had sounded innocent. His phone rang. Samuel Whitmore. "Gabriel, yes. You need to come to St. Matthew immediately." "What happened?" "The hospital has discovered something involving your DNA report." Gabriel stood so quickly his chair slid backward. "I'm on my way." Rain had begun falling again by the time Gabriel entered the medical center. The familiar hallway looked exactly as it had 7 years earlier, only he had changed. Margaret waited outside the genetics office. Beside her stood Daniel Brooks, older, thinner, carrying guilt in every line across his face. Gabriel recognized him immediately. "You worked here." Daniel nodded. "I did." Margaret handed Gabriel the sealed folder. "You should read this." His fingers trembled as he opened it. The first page, the official report. The second page, the archived machine result. The third page, a complete revision log, timestamps, user identification, every digital action recorded. Gabriel's eyes stopped on one line, edited by Daniel Brooks. He looked up. The hallway became unbearably quiet. Daniel's voice barely carried. "I changed it." Gabriel stared at him. "I don't understand. I altered one number. Why?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Because I was afraid." Gabriel took one slow step forward. "My wife spent 7 years alone because you were afraid." Tears rolled freely down Daniel's face. "I know you let me believe my child wasn't mine. I know you destroyed my family." Daniel nodded. "I know. There was no defense left. Only truth." Gabriel looked back down at the pages. The original report remained unchanged, 99%. His daughter, his child, his family. For 7 years, they had existed while he remained absent. His breathing became uneven. He reached the final page. Attached to the report was Daniel's signed confession. Every detail, every phone call, every instruction, every payment, every lie. One name appeared over and over again. Victor Moretti. Gabriel read it once, then again his cousin. The man he had trusted with family business for years. The man who had attended charity galas beside him. The man who had looked him in the eyes while knowing the truth. Gabriel whispered, "Victor?" Daniel nodded weakly. "He threatened my family. That doesn't excuse what I did. It never will." Gabriel folded the papers carefully. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold them. He expected anger. Instead, only sorrow came. The deepest wound wasn't discovering Victor's betrayal. It was realizing Amelia had spent 7 years carrying a burden that had always belonged to him. Hospital administrators arrived. Minutes later, the board immediately ordered an internal investigation. Margaret submitted the archived files. Daniel surrendered every remaining document, including the encrypted flash drive he had protected all those years. Digital forensic specialist confirmed the impossible. The archived server had preserved every keystroke. Nothing had been lost. Nothing could be disputed. The truth no longer depended on memory. It depended on evidence. The very thing Gabriel had trusted above love. The irony was almost unbearable. That evening, Gabriel sat alone inside the hospital chapel, where families often waited during difficult surgeries. The room was empty. A single candle burned quietly near the altar. He held Amelia's wedding ring in one hand. For 7 years, he had carried it inside the pocket of every suit he owned. He had never thrown it away. He had never been able to. Now he understood why. Because some part of him had never truly stopped being her husband. He whispered into the silence, "I'm so sorry." No one answered. He wasn't expecting anyone to. Forgiveness could not be requested from an empty room. It had to be earned. Across town, Amelia finished her evening shift. Sophia waited in the doctor's lounge, reading a children's mystery novel, ready to go home. Sophia smiled. "Can we stop for ice cream?" "I think we can." As they walked toward the parking garage, Amelia's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, she answered, "Dr. Carter." For several seconds, no one spoke. Then she heard a familiar voice she hadn't heard in 7 years. Soft, broken, almost unrecognizable. "Amelia." She stopped walking. Sophia looked up curiously. Her mother's face had turned completely still. Gabriel closed his eyes before speaking again. "I know. Only 2 words, nothing more." But Amelia understood immediately. The truth had found him. Tears gathered silently in her eyes. She leaned against the concrete wall of the parking garage, suddenly unable to stand. Gabriel's voice trembled. I read the original report. Silence. I read my mother's letter. Another silence. I know Sophia is my daughter. Amelia closed her eyes. For 7 years, she had imagined this conversation countless times. She had imagined anger, accusations, questions. She had never imagined hearing regret. Finally, she whispered, "She's been your daughter every single day." The words struck Gabriel harder than any punishment. He lowered his head. I missed 7 birthdays. Yes. I missed her first steps. Yes. I wasn't there when she was sick. No. I wasn't there when she asked where I was. Amelia's voice broke. No. Gabriel covered his eyes with one trembling hand. The silence between them became heavier than any conversation. At last he spoke. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. I only needed you to know. His voice failed. He tried again. I never stopped loving you. Amelia looked at Sophia, who was quietly waiting a few feet away, unaware that her world had just changed forever. Then she answered with gentle honesty. Love was never the problem, Gabriel. She paused. Trust was. The call ended. Neither of them knew what came next. Miles away, Victor Moretti stood inside his office watching city lights shimmer through the rain-covered windows. His assistant rushed inside without knocking. They've reopened the DNA investigation. Victor didn't move. They know. The assistant nodded. They have the original files. For the first time in years, fear found Victor before he had time to hide from it. Justice rarely arrived with applause. More often, it arrived in uncomfortable rooms where people were finally forced to tell the truth. 3 days after the original DNA report resurfaced, the executive board of St. Matthew Medical Center convened an emergency hearing. The conference room overlooked the East River. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows. No reporters had been invited. No cameras were allowed. Only those whose decisions had shaped 7 years of silence sat around the long oak table. Margaret Ellis placed the archive files before every board member. Daniel Brooks sat alone near the end of the table. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes carried the weight of years without sleep. Across from him sat Gabriel Moretti. He had declined the seat at the head of the table. Today, power meant nothing. Truth meant everything. The chair reserved for Victor Moretti remained empty. For the moment, the chairperson opened the meeting. We are here to determine whether medical records were intentionally altered. Margaret stood first. She explained the archive system, the automatic backups, the revision logs, the server history that no employee had realized still existed. Nothing in her voice sounded emotional. She didn't need emotion. Facts were enough. Every digital signature matched. Every timestamp aligned. The machine had remembered what people wanted to forget. When she finished, the room became silent. Then Daniel slowly rose to his feet. I altered the report. No one interrupted him. I changed one number. His voice cracked. I told myself I was protecting my family. I told myself it would only hurt strangers. He looked toward Gabriel. I was wrong. He removed a folded letter from his pocket. I wrote this 2 years ago. I never had the courage to deliver it. The chairperson accepted the letter. It described everything. The threats, the phone calls, the payment, the guilt that had followed every day since. Daniel didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to lessen his responsibility. He simply told the truth. When he sat down again, he looked smaller somehow, as if honesty had finally taken away the burden he had spent years carrying. Victor arrived 20 minutes late. He entered confidently. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect composure, until he saw the document spread across the table. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. What is this? The chairperson answered calmly. The truth. Victor glanced toward Daniel. You've made a terrible mistake. Daniel met his eyes for the first time in years. No, I made it 7 years ago. I'm correcting it today. Victor laughed quietly. A convicted gambler is suddenly considered reliable. Margaret slid another folder across the table. The server logs are. The digital archive is. The forensic analysis is. The evidence doesn't depend on Daniel anymore. Victor stopped smiling. The room no longer belonged to him. Every excuse dissolved beneath documented proof. Gabriel remained silent. He watched the man he had once called family. He expected anger instead. He felt only disappointment. Victor looked toward Gabriel. You know why I did it? Gabriel answered softly. No. You were changing everything. The trust, the inheritance. Your child would have erased my future. Gabriel held his gaze. So you erased mine instead. Victor looked away. No one defended him. Not even himself. The board suspended every charitable partnership connected to Victor's businesses pending a criminal investigation. The Moretti Family Trust immediately removed him from all positions of authority. The family attorney prepared new documents before the meeting had even ended. Samuel Whitmore placed them in front of Gabriel. Your cousin no longer has any decision-making role. Gabriel didn't sign immediately. He read every page, then quietly asked, does removing his authority return 7 years to my daughter? Samuel lowered his eyes. No. Gabriel signed anyway, not because it repaired the past, because it prevented another future built on lies. News of the investigation spread quietly through the hospital. Most staff members never learned the names involved. They only knew that an old injustice had finally been uncovered. Margaret was promoted to Director of Laboratory Integrity. Daniel resigned permanently. Before leaving the hospital one final time, he stopped outside the pediatric wing funded by Gabriel's foundation. Children laughed inside the playroom. He watched them through the glass, then whispered, I hope none of you ever lose 7 years because of someone like me. He left without looking back. That afternoon, Gabriel asked Samuel to arrange something unexpected. Not a press conference, not a legal statement, a private meeting with the hospital staff, doctors, nurses, administrators, anyone who had known Amelia. They gathered in the hospital auditorium. Many assumed Gabriel intended to discuss the investigation. Instead, he walked to the podium carrying only a single sheet of paper. He looked across the room, then folded the speech he had prepared. He no longer wanted rehearsed words. I spent 7 years believing I was the victim. His voice echoed gently through the room. I wasn't. Silence settled over the audience. A report was falsified. That is true. But another truth matters just as much. He paused. The woman I loved looked me in the eyes and told me she had never betrayed me. I chose paper instead of the person. Several nurses lowered their heads. Some remembered Amelia crying quietly after long shifts. Some remembered the day she disappeared without explanation. Gabriel continued. No forged document forced me to stop listening. That choice was mine. I cannot change what I did, but I refuse to hide behind someone else's crime. He stepped away from the podium. No applause followed. He hadn't come for applause. He had come for accountability. Amelia learned about the speech from a senior nurse later that evening. He never blamed you. I know. He blamed himself. Amelia looked out the hospital window. The sunset painted the sky in soft shades of gold. For years, she had imagined Gabriel defending his decision. Instead, he had accepted responsibility for it. That didn't erase the pain, but it changed something. Not in the past, in the possibility of the future. A week later, Sophia returned home from school carrying a permission slip. Mom, yes, our class has family day next month. Amelia smiled gently. That sounds fun. The little girl hesitated. They said we can invite 1 or 2 parents. She looked down at the paper. I've always just invited you. Another pause. Then came the question Amelia had known would eventually arrive. Do you think Daddy would come if I asked him? Amelia felt her heart tighten. She could have answered for Gabriel. She could have protected herself. Instead, she remembered the broken voice on the phone. The apology. The truth. She knelt beside her daughter. I don't know. Sophia nodded. But do you think he'd want to? Amelia smiled through tears. Yes, I think he would. That same evening, Gabriel stood outside a small neighborhood bookstore. The apartment above it glowed warmly. Children's drawings decorated one of the windows. He had learned the address from Samuel only after Amelia agreed it was acceptable for him to know where they lived. She had not invited him inside. She had not forbidden him from coming. She had simply said, "When you're ready to be her father, you'll know what to do." Gabriel remained on the sidewalk. He made no attempt to knock, no attempt to explain. He simply looked toward the lit window, then quietly placed a small gift beside the bookstore entrance, the same wooden moon-shaped music box, perfectly restored, with a handwritten note beneath it, for Sophia, from someone who has 7 birthdays to make up for. He turned and walked away before anyone opened the door. Several minutes later, Amelia found the package. She recognized the music box instantly. It had waited untouched in the nursery for 7 years. Now it had found its way to the little girl it had always belonged to. Amelia lifted the note with trembling hands. She didn't cry because Gabriel had brought a gift. She cried because he hadn't asked for anything in return. Upstairs, Sophia wound the tiny key on the music box. A gentle melody filled the apartment. She smiled. "It sounds like someone coming home." Amelia wrapped an arm around her daughter. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe it does." Across the city, Gabriel unlocked the front door of his empty house. For the first time in 7 years, he walked into the nursery. He switched on the light. The room no longer felt like a monument to loss. It felt like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. On the shelf where the music box had once stood, only Amelia's old letter remained. Gabriel folded it carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. From now on, he wanted those words close to his heart. As he turned to leave the room, his phone vibrated. One new message. Unknown number. He opened it. A photograph appeared on the screen. Sophia, smiling, holding the moon-shaped music box against her chest. No caption, no explanation, only the picture. Gabriel stared at it for a long time. Then, for the first time in 7 years, he allowed himself to believe that forgiveness might not begin with words. It might begin with one small act repeated every day. And somewhere in the quiet apartment above the bookstore, Amelia watched her daughter fall asleep with the music box beside her pillow. She whispered into the darkness, "Let's see if he's learned how to keep a promise this time." Healing never arrived all at once. It didn't erase memories. It didn't rewrite painful years. Healing simply gave broken hearts enough courage to begin again. The first Saturday morning, Gabriel visited the bookstore. He stayed across the street. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He simply watched parents walking hand in hand with their children through the neighborhood. An hour later, the bookstore door opened. Sophia skipped onto the sidewalk, carrying a canvas bag. Almost as large as she was, she spotted him immediately. Her face lit up. "You came." Gabriel smiled. "I said I would." She hurried toward him without hesitation. Children had a remarkable way of trusting what adults complicated. She held up the moon-shaped music box. "I sleep with it every night." "I'm glad." She looked around thoughtfully. "So, what do fathers and daughters do together?" Gabriel laughed softly. "I was hoping you might know," she grinned. "We could figure it out together. I'd like that." From the bookstore window above, Amelia watched them. She didn't interrupt. She didn't hide. She simply observed. Gabriel wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't making grand promises. He was listening. When Sophia spoke about school, he listened. When she proudly explained the names of every pigeon in the park, he listened. When she insisted ducks preferred stale jokes over stale bread, he laughed. The hours passed quietly. For the first time in 7 years, Gabriel wasn't thinking about everything he had missed. He was fully present for what he still had. The visits became a tradition. Saturday mornings, a walk through Riverside Park, hot chocolate in winter, ice cream in spring, library trips on rainy afternoons. Sophia discovered her father had never learned how to braid hair. The first attempt looked more like a loose knot than a braid. She burst into laughter. "It's terrible." "I noticed." "You can practice. I plan to." By the 5th Saturday, the braid almost looked respectable. Sophia proudly showed it to Amelia. "He made this." Amelia smiled. "I can tell." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" She laughed. "Not anymore." It was the first time they had laughed together since the divorce. Neither mentioned it. Neither wanted to break the fragile peace. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, Sophia brought home another school assignment. "Draw your family." She sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by colored pencils. Amelia watched quietly. "So, what are you drawing this time?" Sophia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she carefully sketched 3 people beneath a large oak tree. A woman, a little girl, a tall man. This time, every face was complete. When she finished, she handed the drawing to her mother. "It finally looks right." Amelia felt tears gathering. Before she realized she was crying. Gabriel never asked Amelia for another chance. Not once. He understood that forgiveness wasn't something he could request. It was something she might one day choose or not. Instead, he showed up. Every school recital, every parent conference, every birthday, every scraped knee, every piano lesson, every ordinary moment that quietly built a childhood. Sometimes Amelia caught him waiting in the school parking lot long before dismissal. Not because he was early, because he was afraid of ever being late again. Nearly a year after the truth came to light, St. Matthew Medical Center invited donors to the opening of the new pediatric cardiac wing. Children filled the bright entrance with balloons and laughter. The hospital director welcomed everyone, then smiled toward Gabriel. "Would you do us the honor?" He shook his head gently. "I'd rather someone else." The director looked surprised. "Who?" Gabriel turned. "Dr. Amelia Carter." The room grew quiet. Amelia looked genuinely startled. "You built this." Gabriel smiled. "You've spent your life filling it." The audience applauded as Amelia stepped forward. Together, she and a young patient cut the ribbon. No speeches about the past followed. only hope for the future. After the ceremony, families gathered in the hospital garden, the same garden where Gabriel had once felt the first tiny kick beneath Amelia's heart. The cherry trees had grown taller. Their branches stretched wide across the walking paths. Sophia tugged gently on both of their hands. "Come on." She led them toward a freshly prepared patch of earth. A hospital volunteer handed her a small shovel. "What's this for?" The volunteer smiled. "The foundation is planting a tree for every new pediatric wing." Sophia looked at Gabriel. "Can we plant ours?" He looked toward Amelia. She nodded. Together, the three of them lowered a young maple tree into the ground. Gabriel covered the roots with soil. Amelia steadied the trunk. Sophia patted the earth with both hands. "There." She stepped back proudly. "It'll grow." Gabriel looked at the small tree swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. "So will we." As the celebration slowly came to an end, Sophia wandered a few steps away to chase butterflies across the lawn. For the first time all day, Gabriel and Amelia stood alone. Neither hurried to speak. Some silences still deserved respect. Finally, Gabriel reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He removed something wrapped in soft cloth. Amelia recognized it immediately, her wedding ring. He opened his hand. "I've carried it every day. I know. I wasn't worthy of giving it back." His voice remained steady. "I'm still not sure I am." He looked down at the ring resting in his palm. "I spent years believing strength meant never questioning evidence. My mother warned me. You warned me. I didn't listen." He lifted his eyes. "I can't ask you to forget. I don't want you to pretend those 7 years never happened. They're part of us now." He took a slow breath. "But if there's room in your heart, I'd like to spend the rest of my life earning the trust I threw away." Amelia studied his face. The proud, guarded man she had once married was still there. But another man stood beside him now. One who understood humility. One who no longer confused certainty with wisdom. She gently took the ring from his hand. For a long moment she simply held it. Then she looked toward Sophia, who was laughing beneath the cherry blossoms. "Our daughter deserves parents who tell the truth." Gabriel nodded. "She does. She also deserves to know that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing what comes next." A small smile touched Gabriel's face. "I can live with that. So can I." Amelia extended her left hand, not because the past had disappeared, because the future was finally honest. With careful fingers, Gabriel slipped the wedding ring back onto her hand. This time, there were no witnesses except the wind, the trees, and the little girl chasing butterflies nearby. It was enough. That evening, the three of them walked slowly toward the hospital parking lot. Sophia skipped between them, holding one hand from each parent. Halfway across the path, she looked up. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," Amelia said. "When people get lost, how do they find their way home?" Gabriel looked at Amelia. She smiled. "They follow the truth." Sophia considered that answer, then squeezed both of their hands. "I like that." "So do I," Gabriel whispered. As the sun settled behind the skyline, warm golden light spread across the hospital garden. The young maple tree stood quietly where 3 lives had begun again. Its roots disappeared beneath the earth, invisible, growing stronger every day, much like trust, much like love. Some stories ended with perfect happiness. Theirs ended with something far more precious. A second chance that had been earned. And for Gabriel Moretti, Amelia Carter, and little Sophia, home was no longer a place they had lost. It was the life they chose to build together, one truthful day at a time.